Lon Corleone was watching through a hidden camera when his pregnant wife sold her wedding ring. Not to buy herself diamonds, not to book a vacation, not to celebrate her freedom. She sold it to pay for his funeral. That's when he knew he'd made a mistake. But by then, it was already too late. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to a story that's going to absolutely devastate you. Before we dive in, seriously, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments because I need to know our community is worldwide for stories like this. And listen, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it right now. Hit that subscribe button because what you're about to witness is the kind of story that changes how you see love, trust, and the terrifying cost of doubt. You're going to want to share this. You're going to need to talk about it. So subscribe, and let's go through this emotional journey together. Are you ready? Because we're about to watch a man destroy the best thing that ever happened to him. Day 4, 3:47 p.m. Lon's finger was frozen over his lawyer's number when he saw Allie walk into the pawn shop. He'd been watching her for 96 hours straight, barely sleeping, barely eating, just watching the monitors that showed every corner of their home, every moment of her life, watching her grieve. And God, she was grieving. Not like he'd expected. Not like Claire would have, performative tears for the cameras, followed by champagne in private. No, Allie hadn't stopped crying since the Coast Guard called. She cried in the shower. She cried making coffee she didn't drink. She cried in the nursery they'd painted together, surrounded by tiny clothes for a daughter he'd never met. She fell asleep crying and woke up screaming his name. For 4 days, Lon had watched his wife shatter into a million pieces, and he'd told himself it was an act. It had to be an act. Nobody loved like that. Not really. She was performing for someone. The cameras she didn't know about, the staff, herself. But then she'd gotten the call from the funeral home. The camera in her car picked up every word. Mrs. Corleone, we understand this is a difficult time, but without the body, there are still costs associated with the memorial service. The venue, flowers, programs. We'll need a deposit of $15,000 to proceed. Allie's voice was hoarse from crying. Yes, of course. Whatever he deserves. The best of everything. And the payment method? A long pause. His accounts they're frozen. Estate processing. I have access to the household account, but I need that for the mortgage, the staff, the baby's medical bills. We can't proceed without a deposit, ma'am. I understand. I'll figure it out. My husband deserves a beautiful goodbye. I'll get you the money. She'd hung up and sat in the parked car for 20 minutes, just breathing. That's when Lon should have ended it. That's when he should have called it off. But he didn't. He wanted to see what she'd do, how she'd solve the problem. Now he was watching her walk into Gold and Gems Pawn on 5th Street, her belly swollen with his child, her face swollen from grief. The pawn shop camera, he'd had Noah hack into the security feed because he'd thought of everything, planned for everything, showed her approaching the counter. Can I help you? The clerk was young, bored. Allie's hand shook as she pulled off her wedding ring. No. Lon stood up from his chair so fast it crashed backward. No. I need to sell this. Her voice cracked. How much can you give me? The clerk examined it with a loupe. Lon had spent 4 months choosing that ring. 3-carat diamond, flawless, set in platinum. He'd proposed on a beach at sunset, and she cried then too. Happy tears, he'd thought, but how could he know? How could he ever really know? I could give you $8,000, the clerk said. It was worth $45,000. That's not enough. I need at least $15,000. It's worth more than that. It's take it or leave it, lady. That's the offer. Allie, close her eyes. Her hand went to her belly. The baby was kicking. Lon could see the movement even through the camera. What if I add these? She pulled off her earrings. Anniversary gift last year. And this. Her necklace. Birthday present. And this. Her watch. She was stripping herself of every piece of jewelry he'd ever given her. Every physical reminder that she'd been loved. $15,000 even, the clerk finally said. Final offer. What? Lon whispered to the empty apartment. Why are you doing this? On screen, Allie nodded. Deal. But I need the money today. Right now. What's the rush? She looked at the clerk with eyes so hollow they could swallow the world. My husband died. I need to bury him. You said there's no body. I need to say goodbye. Her voice broke completely. I need to give him the funeral he deserves. He was everything. He was my whole world, and I couldn't save him. I couldn't even find his body. The least I can do, the least I can do is give him a beautiful goodbye. She was sobbing now, full, racking sobs that shook her whole body. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. Okay, lady. Okay, let me get the cash. Lon's phone was in his hand. Martha's number on the screen. End it. End it now. But his thumb wouldn't move, because Allie was still talking, whispering to herself as she stared at the wedding ring on the counter. I'm sorry, Lon. I'm so sorry. I know you wanted me to keep it forever. You made me promise, remember? The day you proposed? You said, this ring means you're mine, and I'm yours until the day we die. She touched the ring one last time. But you died, baby. You died and left me here alone. And I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know how to raise our daughter without you. I don't know how to breathe without you. The clerk returned with the cash. Sign here. She signed. She took the money. She left her wedding ring on a pawn shop counter like a piece of her soul she couldn't carry anymore. And Lon watched her walk out of the frame. Day one, where it all began. Tell me this is a joke. Noah Barzini stared at his best friend like he'd grown a second head. Tell me you're not actually going to fake your own death to test your pregnant wife. They were standing on Lon's yacht, the same yacht that, in 48 hours, would be found capsized and empty off the coast. Lon poured himself a scotch. You think I'm crazy. I think you're traumatized. Claire messed you up, brother. I get it. But Allie isn't Claire. How do I know that? Because I've known you both for 3 years, and I've watched her love you. Noah's frustration was evident. She turned down a job in Paris to stay with you. She volunteers 20 hours a week with sick kids, even though it breaks her heart, because you told her once it was important to give back. She cries at those stupid romantic movies you pretend to hate, but always watch with her. She's pregnant with your child. Claire would have done all that too, until the money was secure. So what's the test? What does Allie have to do to prove herself? Lon swirled his drink. Nothing. That's the point. I just need to see how she acts when she thinks I'm gone. If she mourns me, really mourns me, I'll know it was real. If she doesn't, you'll know you married another liar. Exactly. Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then, and when you come back from the dead, when you tell her you put her through hell for a week while she's carrying your baby, you think she'll just forgive that? If she loves me, she'll understand why I had to know. If she loves you, this will destroy her. Lon finished his scotch. 1 week, Noah. That's all I need. 1 week to be certain. Some certainties cost too much, brother. But Lon wasn't listening anymore. He'd already made up his mind. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m. Allie was dreaming about the baby. A good dream, for once, where Lon was there in the delivery room, crying as he held their daughter for the first time. Then her phone rang. Mrs. Corleone? This is Officer Davis with the Coast Guard. There's been an accident involving your husband's yacht. The dream shattered. Reality was a nightmare. 3 miles away, in a luxury apartment filled with monitors, Lon Corleone watched his wife's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, denial, and finally, devastation. He watched her call his phone 17 times. He watched her vomit from stress. He watched her call the Coast Guard, the hospitals, anyone who might tell her it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. By design, it was perfect. And Lon watched, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting for her to reveal the truth. But as hour after hour passed, as Allie's grief became more raw, more primal, more utterly devastating, a seed of doubt began to grow in Lon's mind. Not doubt about her, doubt about himself. What if Noah was right? What if he just made the worst mistake of his life? Day 4, 8:23 p.m. Allie sat in the nursery with $15,000 in cash on her lap and nothing left of her marriage but memories. The room still smelled like paint, soft yellow, because Lon had wanted to be surprised about the baby's gender, even though the technician had accidentally let it slip to Allie at the 20-week scan. A girl. She was having a girl, and she'd kept that secret for 5 weeks, planning the perfect moment to tell him. Now he'd never know. She pressed her palm against the wall they'd painted together, remembering how he'd gotten more paint on himself than the walls, how he'd laughed and pulled her close despite her protests about getting paint on her clothes. He'd kissed her then, slow and sweet, and whispered against her lips, "We're going to be so happy." Past tense now. They were happy. Once. Her phone buzzed. Another casserole from a neighbor. Another "thinking of you" text. Another reminder that everyone knew her husband was dead, except his body hadn't washed ashore yet. So there was nothing to bury, Nothing to cry over except an empty ocean and a capsized yacht. She ignored the phone. Instead, she opened the drawer of the changing table and pulled out a small box she'd hidden there 3 weeks ago. Inside was a pregnancy test. Not the first one. That one she'd framed and given Alon as a surprise. This was the second one, taken the same day, because she couldn't believe it was real. 2 pink lines that had changed everything. Allie had never believed in love at first sight until she met Lon Corleone. It was 2.5 years ago at a charity gala for children's cancer research. She'd been volunteering with the event coordinators, helping to set up the silent auction. Her real job was teaching art to pediatric patients at St. Mary's Hospital, and the gala was raising money for the same ward where she worked. She'd been arranging a display of artwork created by the kids, watercolors of dreams and hopes from children who might not live to see them come true, when a man in an expensive suit stopped in front of her. This one, he'd said, pointing to a painting of a garden full of butterflies. Who made this? Emma. She's 7. Leukemia. He'd studied the painting for a long time. Is she going to make it? Most people asked that question with morbid curiosity or polite concern. He asked it like the answer mattered, like he genuinely cared about a child he'd never met. We hope so, Allie had said softly. She starts a new treatment protocol next month, but it's expensive and her family's insurance doesn't cover all of it. The man had pulled out his checkbook right there. How much do they need? I don't know the exact amount. Maybe $50,000. He'd written the check for $100,000. Made it out to the hospital with Emma's name in the memo line. Then he'd handed it to Allie and walked away. She'd chased him down. Wait, I don't even know your name. The hospital will need to send a receipt, and Lon Corleone. He'd smiled then, and it had transformed his entire face. Warm instead of distant. Human instead of intimidating. And I don't need a receipt. Just tell Emma that someone believes she's going to make it. That was how it started. She'd sent him a thank you note the next day, a handwritten card with one of her own watercolor paintings, a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. He called her a week later and asked if she'd have coffee with him. She'd said yes. For their entire first date, she hadn't known he was a millionaire. He dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, met her at a small cafe, and talked about books and travel and childhood dreams. He'd asked about her work with the kids, and he'd listened, really listened, as she told him about teaching art to children who were fighting for their lives. Why art, he'd asked. Because when you're 7 years old and you're sick and scared, sometimes you need to create something beautiful, she'd said. You need to prove to yourself that you can still make something good exist in the world, even when everything feels terrible. He'd looked at her like she'd said something profound. Their second date, he'd told her the truth. I need to be honest with you about something. I don't have a normal job. I own a tech company. I have money. A lot of it. And I need to know if that's going to change things between us. She'd laughed. Change things how? People treat me differently when they know. Do you want to keep seeing me? Yes. Do you like talking to me? More than I've liked talking to anyone in years. Then the money doesn't matter, she'd said simply. I like you before I knew, and I like you now. Unless you're secretly a terrible person who kicks puppies or something. He'd smiled that transforming smile again. No puppies have been harmed. Then we're good. 3 months later, he told her about Claire. About the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd played him perfectly until he'd overheard the truth. About how he'd struggled to trust anyone since then. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand, he'd said. I'm going to doubt you sometimes. I'm going to ask questions that sound like accusations. I'm going to need reassurance more than a normal person would. And that's not fair to you, but it's where I am right now. Allie had taken his hands. Then I'll reassure you, as many times as you need, because you're worth it. She'd meant it. For 3 years, she'd meant it. Every time he'd asked, you're not going anywhere, right? After a minor argument, she'd held him and promised she was staying. Every time he'd seemed distant or worried, she'd patiently drawn him out, reminded him that she loved him, showed him through actions and words an unwavering presence that she wasn't Claire. It had gotten better over time. He'd relaxed, trusted more, smiled easier. When he'd proposed on that beach at sunset, he'd cried. You saved me, he'd whispered. I was so broken, and you saved me. When she'd told him about the baby, he'd fallen to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach like he could already hear their child's heartbeat. We made this, he'd said in wonder. We made a whole person out of love. That was the man she'd married. That was the man she'd lost. Now, sitting in the nursery they'd painted together, Allie opened her laptop. She'd been putting this off for 4 days, but the funeral director had been clear. She needed to write an obituary. She needed to tell the world who Lon Corleone had been. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. How do you summarize a love that was your whole world in a few paragraphs? She started typing. Lon Corleone, 38, passed away on November 14th in a tragic boating accident. He was a loving husband, an expectant father, and a man whose generosity touched countless lives. The words blurred through her tears. She kept writing. 3 miles away, Lon read every word on his monitor. His plan was falling apart. He'd expected to catch Allie in a lie by now. Expected to see her on the phone with a secret lover, or researching how to access his frozen assets, or at least looking relieved to be free. Instead, he'd watched her nearly collapse from grief. Watched her sell every piece of jewelry he'd ever given her. Watched her write his obituary with shaking hands and a breaking heart. And now, watching her type, he saw something that made his stomach drop. She'd written, Lon struggled with trust after being hurt in the past, but he was brave enough to love again. He was brave enough to build a life with me. He was the strongest, kindest, most wonderful man I've ever known, and I will love him until the day I die. She knew about Claire. She'd always known about his damage, his doubt, his fear. And she'd loved him anyway. Lon's hand was on his phone again. This time he almost called. Almost ended it. But then the apartment door opened behind him. Noah Barzini walked in carrying takeout bags. You look like hell, brother. I think I made a mistake. You think? Noah set down the food. Lon, it's been 4 days. She's 5 months pregnant, and you're putting her through psychological torture. Of course you made a mistake. She sold her wedding ring, Noah, to pay for my funeral. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, what did you expect her to do? I don't know. Not that. Anything but that. You wanted proof she loves you. You're watching it in real time. So end this. Call her. Tell her there was a mistake. You're alive. Come home. Lon stared at the monitors. At Allie, still typing through tears. 3 more days, he heard himself say. The will reading is in 3 days. I need to see. See what? How much more she can suffer. How broken you can make her before she shatters completely. I need to see if she fights for me. Lon's voice was hollow. If she protects my legacy. If she honors what we built together. The grief could still be real, but what if she takes the money and runs? What if you're not listening to evidence anymore? Noah cut him off. You're looking for reasons to justify what you've already done. Because if you admit you were wrong, you have to face what you've put her through. And that's going to be hard to live with. He grabbed his jacket. 3 more days, he said quietly. Then you lose her forever, whether you come back or not. The door closed. Lon turned back to the monitors. Allie had finished the obituary. Now she was looking at her phone, scrolling through photos of them together. Their wedding day, their honeymoon in Greece, the day they'd found out about the baby. She stopped on one photo. The two of them, her head on his shoulder, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. I miss you, she whispered to the screen. God, Lon, I miss you so much. How am I supposed to do this without you? Lon closed his eyes. In 3 days, at the will reading, he'd find out if Noah was right. If he'd already destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. If some tests of love should never be given. But the thing about tests is this. Sometimes the person being tested isn't the only one who fails. Sometimes the person giving the test learns a truth they can't survive knowing. And Lon Corleone was about to learn exactly that. Day 5. 10:17 a.m. The lawyers arrived in a black Mercedes, and they didn't come with condolences. Allie was in the kitchen, forcing herself to eat a piece of toast she couldn't taste when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. The funeral was scheduled for tomorrow. The will reading was in 2 days. Everyone who mattered had already sent flowers or stopped by with empty platitudes about time and healing. She opened the door to find 2 men in expensive suits and a woman with a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Mrs. Corleone, the older man, spoke first. I'm Richard Hagen, senior partner at Hagen & Associates. This is my colleague James Zielinski and our forensic accountant, Linda Roth. We represent the board of directors at Corleone Technologies. Allie's hand instinctively went to her belly. Is something wrong with the company? May we come in? She led them to Lon's study, A room she'd been avoiding for 5 days because it still smelled like his cologne and contained too many reminders of late nights when she'd bring him coffee and find him lost in code or business plans. Richard Hagan didn't waste time with gentle preambles. Mrs. Corleone, in the wake of your husband's death, the board has initiated a standard audit of company finances. What we found is deeply concerning. Allie felt the room tilt slightly. Concerning how? Linda Roth opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. We've discovered a series of transfers over the past 8 months. Money being moved from company accounts to offshore holdings. Nearly $47 million, funneled through various shell corporations. I don't understand. Your husband was embezzling from his own company, Mrs. Corleone. James Zielinski's voice was sharp, accusatory. He was systematically draining assets, hiding money, presumably preparing for something. We need to know what he was planning and where that money is now. The toast threatened to come back up. No, Allie said firmly. No, that's not possible. Lon would never steal from his own company. He built that company from nothing. It was his legacy, the evidence is clear. Richard pulled out more papers, spreading them across Lon's desk like accusations. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, digital signatures that match your husband's authentication protocols. Either he was embezzling or someone with intimate access to his accounts was doing it in his name. Then someone else did it. Someone who had access, someone who wanted to frame him, or Mrs. Corleone. Linda's voice was gentler, but no less firm. I've been doing forensic accounting for 20 years. This isn't the work of an outside hacker. These transfers required biometric authentication, fingerprint and retinal scans that only your husband could provide. He did this. The question is why, and where the money is now. Allie stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. My husband just died. His body is somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, and you're coming into our home to accuse him of being a thief. We're not accusing, Richard said carefully. We're investigating, and we need your cooperation. As his widow, you may have access to information we don't. Passwords, account numbers, communication about where he moved the money or what he intended to do with it. I don't know anything about this. Did your husband seem worried recently? Stressed? Did he mention any problems with the business? Any reason he might need to hide assets? Allie thought back over the past few months. Lon had been working longer hours, seemed distracted sometimes. But he told her it was just a big project, a new contract he was negotiating. Nothing unusual for a tech CEO. He was working a lot, she admitted. But he always worked a lot. He never mentioned financial problems or anything like this. James leaned forward. Mrs. Corleone, you need to understand the gravity of this situation. If this money isn't found and returned, the board will have no choice but to file a criminal report. Your husband's reputation will be destroyed. Corleone Technologies will likely collapse, which means hundreds of employees lose their jobs. And as his primary beneficiary, you could be held liable for the missing funds. You're threatening me? We're explaining reality. Your husband stole nearly $50 million. That money has to come from somewhere. If the company can't recover it, they'll come after his estate, which means coming after you. Allie's mind was racing. This didn't make sense. Lon had never mentioned money problems. They'd just renovated the nursery. He bought her a new car last month. He'd been planning a baby moon to Hawaii for next month, before she got too pregnant to fly. Unless he'd been planning something else entirely. Unless she'd never really known him at all. No, she pushed that thought away violently. She knew her husband. She knew his character. Whatever this was, there had to be an explanation. I want to see the evidence, she said. All of it. Every transfer, every date, every detail. If you're accusing my husband of something like this, I want to see proof. Linda pulled out a USB drive. It's all here. Transaction logs, authentication records, everything we've compiled so far. Allie took it with shaking hands. We need answers within 48 hours, Richard said, standing. Before the will reading. Because if this goes public, Mrs. Corleone, there won't be an inheritance to read about. There will only be debt and criminal investigations. They left her standing in Lon's study, holding a USB drive that allegedly proved her dead husband was a criminal. She waited until the door closed behind them. Then she sat down at Lon's computer and inserted the drive. 3 miles away, Lon Corleone was having a panic attack. He'd watched the entire meeting through the hidden camera in his study. Heard every accusation. seen the color drain from Allie's face. No, 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 he muttered, pulling out his phone. Noah answered on the first ring. The board found the offshore accounts, Lon said without preamble. What offshore accounts? The ones I set up for the test. I moved money out of the company into protected accounts so that when I died, I could see if Allie would try to access them. I thought she might have someone on the inside helping her find hidden assets. Or you moved $47 million out of your own company to test your wife. Noah's voice was dangerously quiet. Are you insane? It was supposed to be temporary, just for the week, just to see you've committed actual financial fraud to fake test your wife for fake betrayal. Do you understand that? I need you to call the board. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Tell them what, Lon? That you're not actually dead? That you've been playing psychological games while your pregnant wife grieves? That'll go over great. I can't let them think I was stealing from my own company. Then end this. Noah's shout came through the phone. End it now. Come back from the dead. Face the consequences. Fix this before it gets worse. Lon stared at the monitor. Allie had opened the files. She was reading through the evidence of his embezzlement, with tears streaming down her face. He meant to test her loyalty. Instead, he made her question everything she'd ever believed about him. 48 hours, Lon said hoarsely. Just 48 more hours until the will reading. I need to see what she does with this information. If she runs, if she tries to hide the money, if she what? If she acts like a terrified pregnant widow who just found out her dead husband might have been a criminal, what exactly do you think she's going to do? Lon didn't answer. Noah's voice dropped. I've known you for 15 years, brother. I stood up at your wedding. I'm your daughter's godfather, even though she's not born yet. But if you don't end this in the next 24 hours, I'm done. I can't watch you destroy her anymore. I can't be part of this. The line went dead. Lon turned back to the monitors. Allie was still reading. Her hand kept moving to her belly, a protective gesture she probably didn't even realize she was making. Then she did something Lon didn't expect. She wiped her eyes, opened a new browser window, and started searching. Not for offshore accounts or hidden money. She searched how to clear a dead person's name of fraud allegations. Then corporate embezzlement defense lawyers. Then forensic accountants who investigate financial fraud. She wasn't running. She wasn't trying to hide the money or distance herself from the scandal. She was trying to prove his innocence. Lon watched as his wife, 5 months pregnant and drowning in grief, spent the next 3 hours making phone calls, hiring a lawyer with money she didn't have, arranging meetings with forensic experts, demanding access to company servers and financial records. He didn't do this, she said on one call, her voice fierce despite the tears. I don't care what the records show. My husband was a good man. He was honest and ethical, and he would never steal from his own company. Someone set him up, or there's been a mistake, or something else is going on, and I'm going to prove it. She spent the advance payment for the lawyer, $5,000 from the household account that was supposed to cover the mortgage. She risked eviction to defend a dead man's honor. By the time the sun set on day 5, Allie had assembled a team, a lawyer, an accountant, and a cybersecurity expert who owed Lon a favor from years ago. We have 48 hours, she told them in a conference call. 48 hours to figure out where that money went and why. My husband's funeral is tomorrow. I'm going to bury him with dignity, and then I'm going to clear his name. Whatever it takes. After the call ended, she sat alone in the study, staring at Lon's photo on the desk. I know you didn't do this, she whispered. I know you, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows you too. I'm going to protect everything you built. For you. For our daughter. For the truth. 3 miles away, Lon Corleone put his head in his hands. He'd tested her loyalty, and she'd passed in ways he'd never imagined, never deserved, never understood she was capable of. She was fighting for him, even dead, even accused, even with every reason to walk away and protect herself and their baby from the scandal. She was fighting for him. The test was supposed to reveal her true nature. Instead, it was revealing his. And what he saw in the mirror of her devotion was a man who'd never deserved her in the first place. 2 more days until the will reading. 2 more days until she'd learn the truth. 2 more days to figure out if there was any way to undo what he'd done, or if some betrayals are too deep to forgive, even when the betrayer is the one who came back from the dead. Day 6, 6:34 a.m. The morning of Lon's funeral, Ali woke up on the bathroom floor. She'd made it to the toilet just in time for the morning sickness, but she'd been too exhausted to make it back to bed. 5 months pregnant, running on maybe 8 hours of sleep total over the past 6 days, and facing a funeral for a husband whose body would never be in a casket because the ocean had swallowed him whole. Her phone was buzzing. Another call from Richard Hagen's office. Probably. They've been calling every few hours, demanding updates, threatening legal action. She ignored it and pulled herself up using the sink. The woman in the mirror looked like a ghost. Pale skin, hollow eyes, shadows underneath that no amount of concealer would hide. She'd lost weight everywhere except her belly, which seemed to grow more prominent each day, a constant reminder of what Lon would never see. Their daughter kicked, a flutter against her ribs. "I know, baby girl," Ali whispered, touching her stomach. "Today's going to be hard, but we're going to get through it, and then we're going to prove Daddy didn't do what they say he did." She'd been up until 3 a.m. with the forensic accountant, Marcus Chun, going through transaction records. Marcus had found something strange in the authentication logs, something that didn't quite match up with the timeline the board had presented, but he needed more time to analyze it. Time they didn't have. The will reading was tomorrow. Ali's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah, her best friend since college, who'd flown in from Boston the moment she heard about Lon. "I'm outside," Sarah's text read. "Let me help you get ready." Ali opened the door to find Sarah holding coffee, a garment bag, and the kind of determined expression that meant she wasn't taking no for an answer. "You look terrible," Sarah said, which was why Ali loved her. "No platitudes. No careful dancing around the truth. I feel worse. When did you last eat something that wasn't crackers? Does toast count?" "No." Sarah headed straight for the kitchen. "See, I'm making you eggs, and you're going to eat them, even if I have to force feed you. That baby needs protein." While Sarah cooked, Ali told her about the board's accusations, about the missing $47 million, about the team she'd assembled to investigate. Sarah listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When Ali finished, Sarah set down a plate of scrambled eggs and sat across from her. "Do you believe he did it?" she asked quietly. "No. Why not?" Ali had been asking herself that same question for 30 hours. Why was she so certain? The evidence seemed damning. The authentication records showed Lon's fingerprints, his retinal scans. Every security measure had been cleared by him personally, but she kept coming back to one moment. 3 months ago, they'd been lying in bed, her head on his chest, his hand on her belly, their baby bump. Out of nowhere, he'd said, "Promise me something. Anything. If something ever happens to me, if people say things about me that don't sound right, promise me you'll look deeper. Promise me you'll fight for the truth." She'd laughed. "That's morbid. Nothing's going to happen to you." "Promise me anyway." She'd promised. At the time, she thought it was just his paranoia talking, the same anxiety that made him check the locks twice before bed and worry about leaving her alone when he traveled. Now, sitting in her kitchen on the morning of his funeral, that promise felt like prophecy. "He asked me to fight for the truth," Ali told Sarah. 3 months ago, like he knew something might happen. Like he knew someone might try to destroy his reputation. Or like he knew what he was planning and wanted to make sure you'd defend him. Ali's head snapped up. "You think he did it?" Sarah held up her hands. "I think grief makes us see people the way we want to remember them, not necessarily the way they were. I love Lon. He was good to you. But people are complicated, Ali. Sometimes they do things we can't understand. He didn't do this." "Okay." Sarah's voice was gentle. "Then prove it. But eat your eggs first. You're going to need your strength." 3 miles away, Lon was watching the same conversation on his monitor, and Sarah's words hit him like a physical blow. She was right. Grief was making Ali see him as better than he was. She was defending a version of him that didn't exist, that maybe never existed. The real Lon Corleone had faked his own death to test his pregnant wife. The real Lon Corleone had moved $47 million to frame a scenario where she might look guilty. The real Lon Corleone was watching her eat eggs she could barely keep down while she prepared to bury a man who was very much alive. His phone rang. "Noah, the funeral's in 4 hours," Noah said without greeting. "Are you going?" "What?" "No, I'm dead." "How would I? There's going to be over 300 people there, Lon. Tech industry leaders, employees, investors. You could blend in. Stand in the back. See it with your own eyes instead of through cameras." "Why would I do that?" "Because maybe if you see her bury you, you'll finally understand what you've done. Maybe you'll finally end this. Lon was quiet for a long moment. I'll think about it. Don't think. Act. For once in this nightmare, do the right thing. Noah hung up. Lon stared at the monitors. Allie was getting dressed now. Sarah helping her zip up a black dress that had fit perfectly 2 weeks ago, but now hung loose in the shoulders. She looked fragile, breakable, and she was about to stand in front of hundreds of people and eulogize a man who was watching her through hidden cameras. The Riverside Chapel was packed. Allie stood in the entrance, staring at the sea of faces. Employees from Corleone Technologies, business associates, competitors who'd respected Lon even as they tried to outmaneuver him. And in the front row, the board members who'd accused him of embezzlement just yesterday. Richard Hagan caught her eye and nodded solemnly, as if he hadn't threatened to destroy her husband's legacy 48 hours ago. The casket at the front of the chapel was closed. Empty. A symbol of a man who would never be found. Sarah squeezed her hand. You don't have to do the eulogy. I can tell them you're not feeling well. No. Allie's voice was stronger than she felt. I need to do this. He deserves to be remembered properly. She walked down the aisle, feeling the weight of 300 pairs of eyes. Some were sympathetic, some were curious, and some, she was certain, were judging. Wondering if the widow knew about the missing millions. Wondering if she was complicit. Let them wonder. She'd prove them all wrong. The funeral director nodded to her. It was time. Allie stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. For a moment, her vision blurred with tears, and she couldn't speak. Then she felt it. A kick, strong and insistent. Their daughter, reminding her she wasn't alone. Lon Corleone was the best man I've ever known, she began, her voice carrying through the chapel. And I know some of you are wondering if I'm biased, if grief is making me see him as something he wasn't. But I'm not here to canonize him. I'm here to tell you the truth about who he was. In the back of the chapel, hidden behind a pillar and wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap he'd bought at a gas station, Lon Corleone listened to his wife eulogize him. Lon was complicated, Allie continued. He'd been hurt before, and that made him cautious, guarded. He didn't trust easily. But when he did trust, when he let someone in, his love was fierce and complete and unwavering. She pulled out a piece of paper, her hand shaking. I found this last night in his desk. It's a letter he wrote to our daughter. He wrote it the day we found out I was pregnant, but he never showed it to me. He was saving it for her 18th birthday. Lon's blood ran cold. He'd forgotten about that letter. Allie began to read. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means I've been gone for a long time. 18 years, if your mother followed. My instructions, and I want you to know that every single one of those years, I loved you, even the ones I didn't get to see. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I'm writing this today, the day I found out you existed, because I need you to understand something. I'm not a perfect man. I've made mistakes. I've let fear guide me when I should have chosen trust. I've doubted when I should have believed. But your mother, she saved me from the worst parts of myself. She taught me that love isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to believe in someone even when you're scared. Allie's tears fell on the paper, smudging the ink. I don't know what kind of father I'll be. I don't know if I'll be good enough for you or for her. But I promise you this. I will try. Every single day, I will try to be the man your mother believes I am. Because she sees the best in me, even when I can't see it myself. And that's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. In the back of the chapel, Lon's vision blurred. That letter had been written before the doubts came creeping back. Before Claire's betrayal started haunting him again. Before he'd convinced himself that Allie might be lying too. That letter had been written by a version of himself he'd forgotten existed. A version that had chosen trust. The board of Corleone Technologies has accused my husband of embezzlement, Allie said suddenly, and the chapel went silent. They say he stole $47 million. They say the evidence is conclusive. Richard Hagan stood up. Mrs. Corleone, this is hardly the appropriate. Sit down, Allie said, and her voice had steel in it. You came to my home and accused my husband while his body was still lost at sea. You don't get to tell me what's appropriate. Richard sat. Allie turned back to the crowd. I don't know what happened to that money. I don't know why the evidence points to Lon. But I know my husband. I know his character. I know his integrity. And I know he would never betray the company he built or the people who trusted him. So I'm going to find out the truth. I'm going to clear his name. And I'm going to make sure that when our daughter asks about her father, I can tell her he was exactly the man he claimed to be in this letter. A man who chose trust. A man who chose love. A man who was worthy of being remembered. She folded the letter carefully. Lon, wherever you are, I promise you this. I will fight for you. I will protect your legacy. I will make sure our daughter knows her father was a good man. Because you asked me to fight for the truth. And I've never broken a promise to you. I'm not starting now. The chapel was silent except for the sound of people crying. Allie stepped down from the podium and placed her hand on the empty casket. I love you, she whispered. I will always love you, and I will prove to everyone that you deserve that love. In the back of the chapel, Lon turned and walked out before anyone could see him break. He made it to his car, locked the doors, and shattered. Great, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. He'd tested her. He'd tortured her. He'd made her bury an empty casket while defending him against accusations he'd manufactured. And she'd passed every test he'd never should have given. She'd shown him the depth of her love. And all he'd shown her was the depth of his cruelty. Tomorrow was the will reading. Tomorrow, he'd planned to reveal himself. To come back from the dead and see her reaction when she realized it had all been a test. But now, sitting in his car outside his own funeral, Lon Corleone realized something terrible. There was no coming back from this. Even if he walked through the door tomorrow, even if he explained, even if he begged, some betrayals are too deep to forgive. And some men destroy the best thing in their lives while trying to protect it. He was one of them. Day 6, 11:47 p.m. Allie couldn't sleep. The funeral had ended 8 hours ago. The reception had dragged on for another 3. She'd shaken hands with hundreds of people, accepted condolences that felt hollow, and smiled politely at the board members who were actively trying to destroy her husband's reputation. Now she was alone in Lon's study, going through the forensic data for the 100th time, looking for something everyone else had missed. Her phone rang. Marcus Chun, the cybersecurity expert. I found something, he said without preamble. Can you get on a video call? You need to see this. Allie opened her laptop. Marcus's face appeared on screen, and he looked unsettled. What is it? The money trail. It's too clean. Too clean. Marcus pulled up a series of spreadsheets. I've been analyzing corporate embezzlement cases for 12 years. When someone steals from their own company, they hide it. They bury transactions in legitimate expenses. They route money through multiple layers of shell companies. They cover their tracks. But this, he highlighted several transactions. This is textbook obvious. The shell companies are registered to addresses that don't exist. The transaction amounts are round numbers. The authentication timestamps all fall within a specific 4-hour window on Saturdays. Allie leaned closer to the screen. What does that mean? It means either your husband was the stupidest embezzler in history, or someone wanted these transactions to be found. Marcus paused. There's something else. The biometric authentication logs that the board's forensic team says prove Lon did this personally. I compared them to legitimate authentication logs from the same time period. The digital signatures are identical. I don't understand. Biometric data has micro-variations. Even from the same person, no 2 fingerprint scans are exactly identical. There are always tiny differences in pressure, angle, skin temperature. But these? He pulled up 2 logs side by side. These are pixel-perfect copies. Someone didn't use Lon's fingerprints to authorize these transactions. They copied his authentication data and pasted it into the logs. Allie's heart was pounding. So someone framed him? Or someone wanted it to look like someone framed him? Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Here's where it gets weird. I traced the IP addresses where these transactions originated. They all route back to a single location. An apartment in a Meridian building 3 miles from your house. Top floor. Registered to an LLC that doesn't seem to exist anywhere except on paper. What's at that location? I don't know. But whoever set up these transactions did it from there. And Mrs. Corleone, his expression was troubled. The lease on that apartment was signed 8 days ago. 3 days before your husband's accident. The room tilted. 8 days ago, Lon had been alive. He'd kissed her goodbye that morning. He'd put his hand on her belly and told their daughter to be good for mommy. 3 days later, he was dead. Someone was planning this before the accident, Allie said slowly. Someone knew Lon was going to die. Or someone planned for him to die. The words hung in the air like poison. You think someone killed him? Made it look like an accident. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I think someone went to a lot of trouble to set up a very specific scenario. I think the embezzlement accusations are connected to his death, and I think we need to involve the police. No. Allie's response was immediate. Not yet. If this is what I think it is, if someone murdered my husband and framed him, go to the police, alert whoever did this that we're onto them. We need more evidence first. Mrs. Corleone, if someone killed your husband, you could be in danger. I'm already in danger. The board is threatening to destroy everything Lon built. I have 48 hours before the will reading. After that, they're filing criminal charges against his estate, which means taking everything from me and our daughter. She took a breath. What's the address of that apartment? You can't go there alone. Then come with me. Tomorrow morning. We'll see what's there. Marcus hesitated. This is a really bad idea. All my ideas lately have been bad. One more won't hurt. After she hung up, Allie sat in the silence of Lon's study. Her mind was racing through possibilities, each more terrible than the last. Someone had planned this. Someone had set up the embezzlement trail before Lon died. Someone had rented an apartment specifically to create a digital footprint that would lead back to them. But why? If they wanted to kill Lon, why bother framing him for embezzlement? Why not just make it look like a simple accident? Unless the embezzlement was the point. Unless someone wanted to destroy both Lon and his legacy. Wanted to make sure that even in death, he'd be remembered as a thief. Who hated him that much? Allie opened Lon's email, something she'd been avoiding. Reading his messages felt like invading his privacy, even though he was gone. She started with the most recent emails, working backward. Business correspondence, meeting requests, a reminder about their upcoming appointment with the obstetrician. Then she found something odd. An email from 2 weeks ago, sent at 2:47 a.m. No subject line. The sender was an encrypted address that was just a string of numbers. The message contained a single sentence. You can't run from the truth forever. Allie's hand shook as she clicked through more emails. There were others, going back 3 months, all from the same encrypted address, all sent in the middle of the night. She's not who you think she is. How well do you really know your wife? Claire was just the beginning. You'll never be able to trust anyone. The baby might not even be yours. Allie felt sick. Someone had been sending Lon messages, poisoning his mind, feeding his paranoia and doubt. The last message had been sent the night before his accident. If you want the truth, you know what you have to do. What did that mean? What truth? What did Lon have to do? She kept searching through his emails and found a draft in his outbox, written 3 days before his death. Never sent. It was addressed to her. Allie, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, but I've been getting messages, warnings about you, and I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm so sorry. I'm so scared of being wrong. I'm scared of trusting the wrong person again. I need to know the truth. I need to be certain. Please forgive me for what I'm about to do. The draft ended there. Unfinished. Unsent. Allie read it 3 times, and with each reading, a horrible possibility took shape in her mind. What if Lon hadn't died in an accident? What if he'd done something deliberate, something planned, because someone had convinced him she was betraying him? What if her husband had faked his own death? The thought was insane. Impossible. Who would do something like that? Put their pregnant wife through that kind of hell? But the email draft, the mysterious messages, the too perfect embezzlement trail, the apartment rented 3 days before his death. It all pointed to something planned, something intentional. She pulled up the Coast Guard report on her laptop. She'd read it a dozen times, but now she was looking for different details. The yacht had been found capsized at 6:15 a.m. No distress signal had been sent. No emergency beacon activated. The life raft was still secured to the deck. It was as if Lon had just vanished into thin air. Or as if he'd never been on the yacht at all. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop investigating. For your own safety and your baby's. Let it go. Allie stared at the message, her heart hammering. Someone was watching her. Someone knew she'd hire Marcus. Someone was threatened by what she might find. She should have been scared. Any rational person would have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else. Clarity. If someone was warning her to stop, it meant there was something to find. It meant the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. She texted back. Who is this? No response. She tried calling the number. It went straight to a disconnected message. Allie sat in Lon's chair, her hand on her belly, feeling their daughter moving inside her. Your daddy might be alive, she whispered. I don't know how. I don't know why. But if he is, if he's out there somewhere, I'm going to find him. And then I'm going to kill him myself for putting us through this. She meant it as a joke, but it came out sounding like a promise. 3 miles away, Lon Corleone watched his wife figure out the impossible truth, and he felt the last piece of his plan crumble into dust. She knew. She didn't know everything yet. Didn't know about the cameras, or that he was watching her right now, or that he'd orchestrated every piece of this nightmare himself. But she suspected. She was smart enough, determined enough, loved him enough to see through the lies. And tomorrow morning, she was going to show up at his apartment with a forensic expert. She was going to find him. The test was over. Not because he'd ended it, but because she'd solved it. His phone rang. Noah. She knows. Lon said before Noah could speak. Knows what? That I'm alive. She hasn't figured it all out yet, but she's close. She hired some cybersecurity expert who traced the money to this apartment. They're coming here tomorrow. Noah was silent for a long moment. Good. Noah. She's going to what? Find out you're alive? Find out you tortured her for a week to test her loyalty? Find out you put her and your unborn child through psychological hell because you couldn't deal with your trust issues? Noah's voice was hard. She should know, Lon. She deserves to know what kind of man she married. I was going to tell her tomorrow anyway, at the will reading. No, you're going to reveal yourself in a controlled environment where you held all the power, where you could explain and justify and try to make her understand. But this, Noah laughed bitterly. This is better. She figured it out herself. She didn't need you to tell her the truth. She found on her own. That's the most honest thing that's happened this whole week. What do? You face the consequences. You let her find you tomorrow. You tell her everything. And then you live with whatever happens next. She'll leave me. Probably. She'll take our daughter. Definitely. Noah, I can't lose them. I can't. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to play God with her emotions. Noah's voice softened slightly. I love you, brother. But you did this. You made these choices, and now you get to live with them. I'll pray that somehow, some way, Allie is a better person than you deserve and find a way to forgive you. But I wouldn't count on it. He hung up. Lon looked at the monitors. Allie was still in the study, still reading through emails, still piecing together the truth. Tomorrow, she'd find the apartment. She'd find him, and she'd know. He'd wanted to test her love. Instead, he'd proven himself unworthy of it. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying his entire life. Day 7. 8:23 a.m. Allie stood outside the Meridian building with Marcus Chun and Sarah, who'd insisted on coming despite Allie's protests. If your potentially alive husband is in there, you need witnesses, Sarah had said, and possibly a baseball bat. I brought one just in case. You brought a baseball bat? I came prepared for multiple scenarios. Marcus checked his tablet. Top floor. Apartment 47B. The building directory doesn't list a tenant for that unit. They took the elevator in silence. Allie's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. What if she was wrong? What if this was just a coincidence, and Lon really was dead, and she was about to break into some stranger's apartment? What if she was right? The elevator doors opened. They walked down a quiet hallway to apartment 47B. Allie raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. If Lon was in there, if he'd really faked his death and put her through this nightmare, what would she even say to him? You want me to do it? Sarah asked gently. Allie shook her head. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Hello? Is anyone in there? Still nothing. Marcus pulled out a small device. I can bypass the electronic lock. But once we go in, we're technically breaking and entering. Do it. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The apartment was pristine. Expensive furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that looked familiar. Too familiar. Allie walked to the window and looked out. She could see her house. Every window. The backyard. The nursery. Someone had been watching her. Oh my God, Sarah breathed. Allie, look at this. Allie turned. One entire wall of the apartment was covered in monitors. 12 screens, each showing a different view. Her bedroom. The kitchen. Lawn study. The nursery. The driveway. Her whole house under surveillance. And in the center of all those screens, sitting in a chair like a throne, was a coffee cup. Still warm. Someone had been here this morning. Someone had been watching her this morning. Marcus was typing on his tablet. The surveillance system is still active. Recording to a cloud server. Whoever set this up has access to everything, Allie finished. They can see everything I do. She walked closer to the monitors, and that's when she saw it. On the desk, next to the keyboard, was a framed photo. Her wedding photo. She and Lon, smiling at the camera, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The same photo that sat on Lon's desk at home. This wasn't some enemy watching her. This wasn't a stranger who'd killed her husband. This was Lon. Lon had set this up. Lon had rented this apartment. Lon had installed cameras in their home. Lon had faked his death and watched her grieve. That son of a bitch, Sarah said quietly. That absolute son of a bitch. Allie's knees gave out. Sarah caught her before she hit the floor. He's alive, Allie whispered. He's alive, and he's been watching me. He watched me cry. He watched me sell my wedding ring. He watched me bury an empty casket. Where is he now? Marcus was checking the other rooms. The apartment's empty. But based on the warm coffee, he left recently. Maybe an hour ago. Allie pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She dialed Lon's number, the one she'd been calling obsessively for 7 days, the one that always went to voicemail. This time it rang, and in the apartment, somewhere close, she heard a phone ringing. Marcus followed the sound. He opened a drawer in the desk. Lon's phone lit up with Allie calling. He'd left it behind, but there was something else in the drawer, an envelope with her name on it. Allie opened it with numb fingers. The letter inside was in Lon's handwriting. Allie, by the time you read this, you've figured it out. I am alive. I faked my death. I did this to test you, to see if you really loved me, or if you were like Claire. I know that sounds insane now. I know it sounds cruel, because it was insane. It was cruel. And watching you this past week, watching you grieve and fight and sacrifice everything to protect my memory, I realized something. You're nothing like Claire. You never were. I was wrong. I was so terribly, horribly wrong. And now I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to come back from what I've done. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. I've always loved you. And I understand if you can't forgive me. If you're reading this, the will reading is in 4 hours. I was supposed to reveal myself there. But now I think maybe I should just disappear for real. Let you move on. Let you find someone who deserves you. Because I never did. Lon. Allie read the letter twice. Then she crumpled it in her fist and screamed. All the grief, the pain, the exhaustion, the fear of the past 7 days, it came pouring out in a sound that was barely human. Sarah held her while she shattered. Again, for the second time in a week. But this time it was different. This time, she wasn't mourning a dead husband. She was mourning a marriage that had just died. When she finally stopped crying, when she could breathe again, Allie stood up. The will reading is at 1 p.m., she said, her voice hollow. He thinks he might not show up. He thinks he might just disappear and let me move on. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. Allie looked at the monitors, at the invasion of her privacy, at the evidence of her husband's betrayal. I'm going to that will reading, she said. And if he doesn't show up, I'm going to find him. Because we're not done. Not even close. He doesn't get to put me through hell and then just disappear. He's going to face me. He's going to explain. And then I'm going to decide whether he gets to be part of our daughter's life or not. She touched her belly. Because this isn't just about me anymore. This is about her. And she deserves better than a father who would do this. She deserves the truth. Marcus cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Mrs. Corleone, I think he's going to show up. The letter sounds like a man who knows he has to face the consequences. Good, Allie said coldly. He should be scared. She walked out of the apartment without looking back at the monitors, at the evidence of her husband's cruel experiment. 4 hours until the will reading. 4 hours until she'd see Lon Corleone again. 4 hours to decide if the man she loved still existed, or if he died the moment he decided to test her love. Day 7, 12:47 p.m. Allie sat in the conference room at Martha Tessio's law office, 13 minutes before her dead husband's will reading, and tried to remember how to hate him. It should have been easy. He'd faked his death. He'd watched her grieve through hidden cameras. He'd tested her like she was a lab experiment instead of the woman carrying his child. But her hands kept shaking, and she couldn't tell if it was from rage or the terrible, traitorous hope that when he walked through that door, she'd see some explanation in his eyes that would make this all make sense. There wasn't one. She knew that. But hope was a stubborn thing. Sarah sat beside her, silent support. Marcus had wanted to come too, but Allie had asked him to stay behind. This was between her and Lon. However it ended, it needed to be private. The conference room was filling up. Richard Hagan and the board members who'd accused Lon of embezzlement. Noah Barzini, who kept glancing at Allie with something that looked like guilt. A handful of executives from Corleone Technologies. Martha Tessio herself, looking more uncomfortable than Allie had ever seen a lawyer look. At 12:55 p.m., Martha cleared her throat. "We're still waiting for one more person," she said carefully. "Let's give them a few more minutes." Allie's heart hammered. So Martha knew. Martha wasn't on it. Who are we waiting for? Richard Hagan checked his watch. "Everyone named in the will is present." "Just a few more minutes," Martha repeated. 1 p.m. came and went. Allie felt something inside her crack. He wasn't coming. After everything, after she'd found his apartment and his cameras and his letter, he was choosing to hide. He was a coward on top of being a monster. "I think we should begin," Richard said. "We've all taken time out of our day, and..." The conference room door opened. Lon Corleone walked in. The room erupted. Several people stood up. Someone screamed. Richard Hagan's face went white as a sheet. But Allie didn't move. She just stared at her husband, her dead husband, her alive husband, standing in the doorway in a suit she'd never seen before, looking like he'd aged 10 years and 7 days. Their eyes met. His were red-rimmed, haunted, desperate. Hers were cold. "Hello, Allie," Lon said quietly. She didn't respond. "Someone called the police," Richard was saying. "This is insane. He's alive? He faked his death?" The embezzlement was also fake," Lon said, still looking at Allie. "I'll move the money to test the security of our offshore protocols. It's all accounted for. Martha has the documentation. Every penny is back in the company accounts as of this morning. You faked your own death." Noah stood up, and Allie realized he was acting. He'd known. Of course he'd known. "Lon, what the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking I needed to know the truth." Lon finally tore his gaze away from Allie to address the room. "I was thinking I'd been betrayed before, and I needed to be certain my wife was who she claimed to be. So I staged my death. I watched her for a week, and I learned exactly who she is." He turned back to Allie. "She's everything good I'm not. Everything pure and loyal and true. She fought for my reputation when everyone else was ready to believe I was a thief. She sold her wedding ring to pay for my funeral. She defended my honor to people who were actively trying to destroy it. She never wavered. Not once." Tears were streaming down his face now. "And I repaid that loyalty by putting her through hell, by watching her break and doing nothing to stop it, by choosing my fear over her love. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just needed you all to know that Allie Corleone is innocent of everything except loving a man who didn't deserve it." The room was dead silent. Allie stood up slowly. Her hand went to her belly, a protective gesture that had become habit. "You watched me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You put cameras in our home. You watched me cry myself to sleep. You watched me throw up from stress. You watched me sell everything you ever gave me to bury an empty casket. Yes, you did this while I'm carrying your daughter." Lon flinched. "A daughter? A daughter you would have known about if you'd just asked me instead of testing me. I found out the gender 2 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." Her voice broke. "I had this whole plan. A yellow cake with pink filling inside. A little pair of shoes. I was going to surprise you. Allie, I don't." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't tell me you were scared or broken or damaged by what Claire did. Because you know what? I was scared too. Scared of not being enough for you. Scared that your money would change things between us. Scared that I'd never be able to prove I loved you for you, not for what you could give me." She took a step toward him. "But I didn't test you, Lon. I didn't fake a terminal illness to see if you'd stay. I didn't pretend to cheat to see if you'd forgive me. I just loved you. Every single day, even on the hard days, even when you were distant or suspicious or checking the locks 3 times because you couldn't trust that we were safe. I just loved you and hoped it would be enough." "It was enough," Lon whispered. "It was always enough. I was just too broken to see it." "You're right. You were too broken." Allie's hand tightened on her belly. "And now I'm broken too. Because how do I ever trust you again? How do I sleep in a bed with a man who might be watching me through hidden cameras? How do I raise a daughter with someone who thinks love is something you test instead of something you give?" She walked toward the door, and Lon stepped aside to let her pass. She paused in the doorway. "Martha, please send me the paperwork for whatever I'm inheriting. I assume since Lon's alive, the will doesn't matter. But I'll need access to funds for the baby. I'm sure we can work out custody arrangements through lawyers." "Allie, wait." Lon's voice was desperate. "Please, Just give me a chance to what? She turned back to him. To explain why you tortured me? To justify putting me through the worst week of my life? There's nothing you can say that will make this okay, Lon. Nothing. I know, but I have to try. He took a step toward her, then stopped when he saw her flinch. These past 7 days, watching you, I've seen things I never saw before. How strong you are. How brave. How you kept going even when you were falling apart. I saw you protect my memory, defend my name, fight for our daughter's future. And I saw something else too. He pulled something out of his pocket. A small notebook. I started writing things down. Things I noticed. On day 3, you stopped eating. You couldn't keep anything down except crackers and ginger tea. But you forced yourself to eat anyway because of the baby. On day 4, you called the hospital where you volunteer and asked if they needed help because you said sitting at home alone was making you crazy and you needed to do something useful. On day 5, you got a letter from Emma. Remember Emma? The little girl with leukemia I wrote a check for when we first met. Allie's eyes widened slightly. She'd forgotten about that letter in the chaos of everything else. She's in remission, Lon continued. She wrote to tell you that she's cancer-free, and she wanted to thank you for always believing she'd make it. She drew you a picture of a butterfly. You hung it on the fridge, and you cried for 20 minutes because you were so happy for her, even though your own world was falling apart. He opened the notebook, and Allie could see it was filled with handwriting, pages and pages of observations. Day 6, the morning of the funeral, you threw up 3 times, but you still did your makeup and put on that dress and stood in front of 300 people to defend my honor. You didn't have to do that. You could have let someone else give the eulogy. But you did it because you said I deserved to be remembered properly. His voice was shaking now. I watched. You be braver and stronger and better than I've ever been in my entire life. I watched you love me even when you thought I was gone. And I realized something. I didn't deserve to test you. I didn't deserve to doubt you. I didn't deserve you at all. He closed the notebook. You're right. There's nothing I can say to make this okay. But I need you to know that every moment of these 7 days has shown me exactly who you are. You're not Claire. You never were. And I was a fool to ever doubt that. Allie was crying now, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. You broke me, she said. You took the worst thing that could ever happen to a wife and you made it happen on purpose. You shatter me into a million pieces. How do I come back from that? I don't know if you can. Lon's voice was barely audible. I don't know if we can, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn back even a fraction of your trust. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to work on my issues. I'm going to prove to you that the man you married, the man who wrote that letter to our daughter, that man still exists under all this fear and damage. He took a careful step closer. And if you can't forgive me, if you need to leave and take our daughter and build a life without me in it, I'll understand. I'll sign whatever papers you want. I'll set up a trust fund so you never have to worry about money. I'll stay away if that's what you need. But please, Allie, please don't give up on me yet. Give me a chance to prove I can be better. Give me a chance to be the man you deserve. The room was silent except for the sound of Allie's crying and the traffic 43 floors below. Sarah touched Allie's arm gently. What do you want to do? Allie looked at her husband, really looked at him, at the man who'd saved a 7-year-old girl he'd never met. The man who'd cried when she'd told him about the baby. The man who'd painted the nursery and gotten more paint on himself on the walls. The man who'd been so damaged by betrayal that he destroyed his own life trying to prevent it from happening again. The man who'd watched her for 7 days and documented every moment like he was trying to memorize her. The man who was broken, but willing to try to heal. She thought about their daughter, about what kind of life she wanted to give her. A life with a father who'd made a terrible mistake, but was willing to do the work to fix it, or a life without a father at all. She thought about the letter Lon had written to their daughter, about being the man Allie believed he could be. She thought about love and what it meant. If it was only real when it was easy, or if it was something you fought for, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when you weren't sure you could survive it. I can't do this right now, she finally said. I can't make this decision in a room full of people while I'm still trying to process the fact that you're alive. Lon nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. But Allie continued, I'm not making any permanent decisions today either. I'm not filing for divorce. I'm not cutting you out of our daughter's life. I'm not running away. Hope flickered in Lon's eyes. What I'm going to do is go home. Our home. And you're going to find somewhere else to stay for a while. And we're going to start therapy. Couples therapy. individual therapy, whatever it takes. And you're going to prove to me day by day, choice by choice, that you understand what you did was wrong and you're willing to do the work to change. She wiped her eyes. I love you, Lon. I still love you, even though part of me wishes I didn't. But love isn't enough. Trust matters. Safety matters. Knowing that the person you're with won't torture you to test your loyalty matters. So if you want our marriage to survive this, you're going to have to earn it back. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts or promises. With time, with consistency, with proof that you're willing to do the hard work of healing. I'll do whatever it takes, Lon said immediately. Anything, everything. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust if that's what you need. Is what I need. Allie touched her belly, and it's what our daughter needs. She deserves a father who's whole, not broken. So you're going to fix yourself, Lon, and I'm going to heal. And maybe, if we're both willing to do the work, we can find our way back to each other. And if we can't, Allie's smile was sad. Then at least we'll both be healthier people, better co-parents. And our daughter will grow up knowing that sometimes love means letting go. She walked to the door, then paused. The cameras come down today. All of them. And you're going to be the one to remove them. I want to watch you dismantle every single piece of surveillance you installed in our home. Of course. Yes. Absolutely. And Lon, she looked back at him one more time. Don't ever doubt my love again. I've proven it in ways no one should ever have to prove it. If that wasn't enough, nothing will be. So the next time you're scared or suspicious or worried that I'm lying to you, you come to me. You talk to me. You trust that I meant my wedding vows when I said them. Because I did. For better or worse. In sickness and health. Till death do us part. Her voice hardened slightly. And you were dead, Lon. For 7 days, you were dead to me. We're starting over now. Like we're meeting for the first time. And this time, you're going to choose trust. Or we're done. She walked out of the conference room. Sarah followed, but not before turning to Lon and saying quietly, hurt her again and I'll destroy you in ways that will make this week look like a vacation. Then they were gone. The conference room erupted in conversation, but Lon didn't hear any of it. He just stood there, watching the door Allie had walked through, holding the notebook full of observations about his wife. Noah approached him carefully. That went better than you deserved. I know. She's giving you a chance. I know. Don't waste it. I won't. Lon looked at his oldest friend. I need the name of the best trauma therapist in the city. And a marriage counselor. And I need you to help me find a place to stay while I work on myself. Already done. I have a list of therapists. And you can stay in my guest room as long as you need. Noah paused. For what it's worth, I think you can come back from this. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time. But Allie's right. Love isn't enough. You have to do the work. I will, Lon said. I'll do whatever it takes. 3 months later, Allie stood in the nursery, painting the final wall. Not yellow this time. A soft pink, because they knew it was a girl, and there was no reason to hide it anymore. Lon was sitting on the floor, assembling the crib they'd bought together last week. Their first shopping trip since he'd come back from the dead. It had been awkward and careful, both of them hyper-aware of boundaries and triggers, but they'd made it through. Therapy was helping, both individual and couples. Allie was working through the trauma of the 7 days. Lon was working through the paranoia and trust issues that had led him to create the test in the first place. They weren't living together yet. Lon was still at Noah's, though he came over 3 times a week for supervised visits. Supervised by Sarah, who still didn't trust him and made sure he knew it. But they were talking, really talking, about his fears, her pain, their hopes for the future. About how to rebuild something that had been shattered so completely. It was slow. Some days, Allie couldn't look at him without seeing the cameras, the apartment, the cruelty of the test. Other days, she saw glimpses of the man she'd married, the one who'd written letters to their unborn daughter and cried at romantic movies. How's the crib coming? She asked. Lon held up a piece. I think this is supposed to attach to this, but the instructions are in Swedish. You run a tech company. You can't figure out Swedish furniture instructions. Apparently my genius has limits. He smiled, and it was genuine, lighter than it had been in months. Want to take a break and get some ice cream? I know you've been craving that weird mint chocolate chip with pickles thing. It's not weird. It's pregnancy cravings. But she set down her paintbrush. Yeah, okay. Ice cream sounds good. They drove to the small ice cream shop where they'd had their 3rd date, and Allie realized it was the first time they'd been there since before everything happened. Do you remember what you ordered that night? Lon asked as they sat outside with their cones. Strawberry. You got coffee and pretended to like it even though you hate coffee-flavored things. I wanted to seem sophisticated. You seem like a liar with terrible taste in ice cream. They both laughed, and for a moment, it felt almost normal. Then Allie's smile faded. I am scared. Of what? Of this. Of us. Of letting my guard down and then finding out you've been testing me again. Lon set down his ice cream and looked at her seriously. I will never test you again. I will never doubt you again. I've learned my lesson in the most painful way possible. You are who you've always been. Loyal, honest, loving. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. How do I know that's true? You don't. Not yet. But I'll prove it. Day by day. Choice by choice. And one day, maybe you'll wake up and realize you trust me again. Not because I've demanded it, but because I've earned it. Allie touched her belly. She was 8 months now, huge and uncomfortable and counting down the days until she could meet their daughter. She's going to be here soon. I know. I want you there. At the birth. Lon's eyes widened. Really? Really? You're a father. And despite everything, I think you're going to be a good dad. You just need to be a good dad to yourself first. Take care of your own wounds before you can take care of hers. I'm trying. I know you are. I can see it. She took a breath. My therapist thinks maybe in another month or two, if we keep making progress, you could move back home. Not into our bedroom, the guest room, but home. I'd like that. More than anything. They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. On the drive home, Allie said quietly, I read your notebook, the one where you documented everything during those 7 days. Lon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Last week, you left at the house after our last therapy session. I'm sorry. I should have thrown that away. It's evidence of the worst thing I've ever done, and you shouldn't have to. It helped, Allie interrupted. Reading it, seeing what you saw, how you documented every moment, even the ones where I was falling apart. How you wrote about regretting it more with each passing day. How you kept writing I was wrong in the margins. She looked out the window. You were wrong, but you knew it. Even before I found the apartment, you knew. And that matters. It doesn't excuse what you did, but it matters. They pulled into the driveway of their home. Their home. Not Allie's home or Lon's home, but theirs. Thank you, Lon said, for giving me this chance. For not giving up on us. For being stronger than I ever was. Don't thank me yet. We still have a long way to go. I know, but we're going. That's what matters. For weeks later, at 3:47 a.m., Allie's water broke. Lon was at Noah's, but he made it to the hospital in 15 minutes, breaking probably a dozen traffic laws on the way. He found Allie in the delivery room, Sarah on one side holding her hand, a nurse on the other. You're here, Allie gasped between contractions. I'm here. I'll always be here. He took her other hand. How are you doing? I'm about to push a human being out of my body. How do you think I'm doing? Sarah glared at him. This is your fault. I know. If you upset her during labor, I will end you. Understood. But Allie squeezed his hand. I'm glad you're here. 7 hours later, at 10:52 a.m., their daughter was born. She was perfect. 6 pounds, 8 ounces, tiny fingers and toes, a head full of dark hair. And when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were the same gray-blue as Lon's. The nurse placed her on Allie's chest, and both parents started crying. She's here, Allie whispered. She's really here. Lon touched their daughter's tiny hand, and she wrapped her fingers around his. Swetfart. I'm your dad. I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm going to make mistakes. But I promise you, I will love you and your mom with everything I have. I will be better for you. I will be the man you deserve. The baby made a small sound, and Lon laughed through his tears. I think she's going to hold you to that, Allie said softly. Good. I need someone to hold me accountable. They named her Emma Grace. Emma, after the little girl who'd brought them together. Grace because they both needed it. When Sarah had left to make phone calls and the nurses had given them privacy, Allie looked at Lon holding their daughter. You can sit, she said, gesturing to the chair beside the bed. He sat, carefully cradling Emma. I've been thinking, Allie said, about us, about what comes next. Okay, I'm not ready for you to move back home yet. I'm not ready to share a bed or go back to how things were before. But I think I'm ready to try dating. Lon looked up, confused. Dating? Yeah, like we did the first time. Coffee dates. Dinner. Movies. Getting to know each other again. slowly, with no pressure and no expectations. Just two people figuring out if they want to build a life together. We already have a life together. We have a daughter. We have a daughter. But we don't have trust yet. And I need trust before I can have a marriage. She reached out and touched Emma's tiny foot. So let's date. Let's be co-parents who are dating. And we'll see where it goes. And if it doesn't go anywhere, then at least we tried. At least we gave ourselves a real chance. Not one built on tests or doubts or fear. She met his eyes. What do you say? Want to go on a date with me sometime? Lon smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him in months. I'd love to. How about next week? There's this little cafe I know. They have terrible coffee, but the company is worth it. Sounds perfect. 3 months after Emma was born, Lon and Allie went on their first official date. Coffee at the same cafe where they'd had their first date years ago. 6 months later, they went to a movie. Emma stayed with Sarah, who still didn't fully trust Lon, but was slowly warming up. 9 months later, Lon moved back into the house. Not into the master bedroom, but into the guest room. Close enough to help with Emma at night. Far enough to maintain boundaries. 1 year after Emma was born, Allie woke up and realized something had shifted. She trusted him again. Not completely, not without scars, but enough. Enough to try. That night, after they put Emma to bed, she found Lon in the guest room packing a bag. What are you doing? She asked. I got an apartment. I think it's time I gave you more space. You've been so patient, but I can tell I'm still making you uncomfortable, and stop packing. He stopped. I don't want you to get an apartment. I want you to move back into our bedroom. Allie, you don't have to. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. Because you've done the work. You got a therapy. You've been patient and consistent, and you've proven that you meant what you said. You've earned back my trust. She stepped closer. I'm not saying everything's perfect. I'm not saying I've forgotten what you did. But I've forgiven you. And I want to try again. Really try. As husband and wife. Not just co-parents who are dating. Lon's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? I'm sure. She took his hand. Welcome home, Lon. That night, they slept in the same bed for the first time in over a year. No cameras. No tests. No doubts. Just two people who'd broken each other and chosen to heal. Just a family that had almost fallen apart but found their way back together. Just love. Imperfect, scarred, hard-won love. The kind that matters most. 5 years later, Emma started kindergarten, and both Lon and Allie cried on the first day. She's so big. Allie sniffled, watching their daughter walk into the classroom with her sparkly backpack. She's 5, Lon laughed. She's supposed to be big. But wasn't she just born? Didn't we just bring her home from the hospital? Time moves fast. They walked back to the car hand in hand, a gesture that had become natural again. Do you ever think about it? Allie asked quietly. About that week? They didn't talk about it much anymore. The therapist had helped them process it, work through it, learn from it. It was part of their history now, not their present. Sometimes, Lon admitted, usually when I'm feeling grateful. Because as terrible as it was, as much as I regret it, it showed me something I needed to see. What's that? That you're the strongest person I've ever met. That your love is real and constant and unshakable. That I'm the luckiest man alive to have you and Emma. He squeezed her hand, and that I never want to take that for granted again. Allie leaned her head on his shoulder. We made it. We made it. I love you. I love you too. Always have. Always will. They drove home together, to the house they'd almost lost, to the life they'd fought to rebuild, to the future they were creating one day at a time. Some tests of love should never be given, but sometimes the people who survive them come out stronger. Sometimes broken things can be put back together, even if the cracks still show. Sometimes love is enough, not because it's perfect, but because both people choose it every single day. Lon and Allie chose it, and that made all the difference. The end. If this story moved you, if you felt every emotion right alongside Allie and Lon, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Seriously, this channel is built on stories that make you feel something real, something deep, and I pour my heart into every single one. Your subscription tells me these stories matter to you as much as they matter to me. And please, drop a comment below. Tell me what you thought. Would you have forgiven Lon? Could you have walked away? Have you ever had to rebuild trust after it was shattered? I read every single comment, and your stories, your perspectives, they inspire the content I create. This community is what makes this channel special. So subscribe. comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about love that survives the impossible. Because these stories, they're for all of us who've ever had to choose between giving up and fighting for what matters most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.